and sit in the middle of the highway, right? That's typically what people think of when they think of activists, and they kind of get really afraid of little ways that they can go and actually make a difference in their own communities. So wanted to go and kind of take some knowledge I was able to kind of go and gather. I'm probably on a few different lists at this point because I went to a bunch of the communist groups, I went to the anarchist groups, just trying to find out what is the new cutting edge type ways of activism and how can we actually utilize that in today's society. So a little bit about what the Leadership Institute is. So first and foremost, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, we're nonpartisan, but we love to train conservatives. So we have an open admissions policy, so thank you guys all for coming. Now, because we are a nonprofit, we don't advocate for or against policies, we don't advocate for or against candidates, and we don't advocate for or against political parties. So with all that legal stuff being said, we can start getting into some of the things that the Leadership Institute has actually gone and accomplished. So these are a bunch of the groups that you guys probably have seen that all got started with the Leadership Institute. The newest one actually being Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty was really spurred up because of COVID and parents finally being able to go and see what their kids are learning, and they wanted to go and speak out against it. So the Leadership Institute went and did that and really started a massive campaign that really kind of started from Loudoun County, Virginia, which is real close to headquarters there. You've also probably heard of Raleigh Gaines. Well, guess what? She now has her own center at the Leadership Institute, and she does a bunch of speaking engagements all through the Leadership Institute. So that's one of the things there. And we also helped her with her lawsuit that also helped make her one of the newest millionaires. So very good on her. So today we're going to go and cover a few different things. So first of all, we got the old reliables, we've got political theater and what it is, online activism, in-person activism, and guerrilla activism. These are all different techniques that you can actually go out and use. Now, when we start to think about the old reliable methods, right, this is kind of what people think of for us as being an activist. Well, you go out and you knock on doors, you make phone calls, or maybe you'll donate to a political candidate or a political organization or a PAC, you name it. Maybe if you're big and important enough, you can do an endorsement, or maybe you're one of the grassroots endorsements, citizen endorsements that a lot of candidates are starting to get involved in. Or maybe you're asked to go and host an event or fundraiser, or maybe even just have people come into your facility or your business and come do a tour of what you actually have to offer in the community. So when we think about politics as is, these are the ones that consistently, time and time again, continuously being told to you guys is, this is how you get involved. And then the buck kind of stops there, right? Or maybe you can come and join our organization. And that's kind of where it all stops. And unfortunately, we haven't really caught up to the modern day times. Because there's a heck of a lot more ways to be a thorn in your opponent's foot than going and doing just a donation or a form of voter contact. Now, one thing I do want to say is, even though those are the old reliables, there's a reason that they're the old reliables, right? They've been time tested, time and time again. These are the things that really help move the needle. But there's also a lot more other ways to move that needle. And unfortunately, as conservatives, we've really gone and seen just the impact of that being utilized against us. And we're caught flat-footed, and we have no idea what exactly it is that we can do. So we're going to kind of learn about some of these different ways. So you guys have all probably heard about political theater. This is ranging from following someone around in a chicken suit, but this is the basis for pretty much every single level of activism. So when you look at it, you have the supportive type of political theater, and this is where the activists come in, they appear supportive, and they act like supporters. They completely infiltrate the organization just to go and pretty much celebrate or do whatever craziness they want. And then all of a sudden, people start to see the irony of their involvement, because they'll kind of just hyperbolize everything that's going on and make things just completely ridiculous. And that's really that supportive stance. Then there's the corrective stance. And this is the one where they really start to hijack the identity of the movement. And we've kind of seen that with a lot of organizations in the past, like Black Lives Matter, things like that really have just kind of started out as one cause, and ended up a completely different cause. And essentially that's where you go and really start to reveal the true intentions of what's being done. I have a friend right now that actually works for an activist group called End Jews Hatred. And one of the things that has been done is, there's something we're going to talk about, but it's called Zoom baiting. So you go and you join a Zoom meeting and you start asking questions to these moderators and these activists that they have that are pro-Palestinian. And then all of a sudden they start to slowly reveal their true intentions, which is not to go and just, defend Gaza. It's to actually eradicate the Israeli state. Okay, so by asking kind of guided questions through Zoom, you're able to find out their true intentions and expose them for what it is that they actually want to do in the long run. Then they have the naive one. This is where you act naive and then all of a sudden your actions are being interpreted as a protest. We've all gone and seen probably the guy Bruno that does Borat, right? Yeah. We've seen him go and do that naive take time and time again, just even in just kind of normal society where he'll show up and then just all of a sudden just act really dumb and then kind of just get people to just completely react a totally different way, right? We've all seen those scenes. And then we have the absurdity. And this is where you just go and make the activists look like clowns and just really just try and be as funny as possible. This is very common on Twitter. You'll see a lot of people, it's called dunking on someone on Twitter, if you're not that big into Twitter, but where you'll go and you'll see someone say something and then they get quote tweeted and then all of a sudden they just totally make fun of that group for their stance and just again, show the absurdity of it all. And then finally we have the provocative, and that's where they act as provocateurs to expose vulnerabilities, to ridicule or insult the opposition, okay? So all of those are different forms of political theater. Political theater is truly the heart of any level of activism that you see at a public level, because you're putting on a show for the general public, okay? So, great quote from Frederick Bastiat. We must admit that our opponents in this argument have a marked advantage over us. They need only a few words to set forth a half-truth, whereas in order to show that it is a half-truth, we have to resort to a long and arid dissertations. Amen. And we can even look at this quote and say, guess what? Bastiat, you fell into the same trap as well, because you could have just said, our messaging stinks, and it would have been just as effective. So we always have to keep this in mind when we think of our messaging. Our messaging, in order to really be effective, number one, it's got to be short and concise. There's a reason that when you go and you turn on the TV, you hear those 3-second clips of people going and talking, and they're out there in the streets, and you can hear their entire message right there being audible to everyone. It's repetitive, and it's just one of those things that's just nice and short. It's like selling a car, Or heck, there's a guy, Dan the Mattress Man. Guess what? There's a reason he goes by that. It's because it's short and concise, but it's also memorable, okay? Because when you hear Dan the Mattress Man, that jingle works every time. So, thinking about the memorability of it all, you got to make sure your message isn't bland. You got to make it stand out. If it's not fun, you're really not going to go too far. A lot of times, groups really take themselves extremely seriously when it comes to activism, and that's kind of working against yourself, because guess what? It's pretty much who's going to be the bigger jester in this game is going to be the one that walks away victorious. And when we think about an effective message, you got to be one that conveys your point, is also kind of serving as a call to action, because it's encouraging other people to get involved, but it also grabs that attention, okay? Those right there are the keys to making sure that your message stands out in the long run. So here's a little video basically going over just how a handful of people can really go and create a massive impact, because they realized that by going and being a protester at a certain event that you guys are going to see here very soon, 2 people are able to go and amplify their message amongst the masses. Because at an event that you think that there'd be thousands of protesters, there was only 2. And the media, they ate it up. So I'm going to show this to you guys.
Check out this post and article by The Hill. Notice this picture? Protesters outside the New York courtroom with anti-Trump signs. How does this pic make you feel? If you love Trump, this may upset you. The weaponization of the justice system. If you hate Trump, this may vindicate you, knowing there are people out there that understand your cause and protesting on your behalf. Check out this video. This is the actual video of this picture. It's 2 protesters, most likely paid, and 30 mainstream media cameras there just to record it. Now check this out. Did a quick reverse lookup on this picture. Can you see how many news articles this picture was used all over the world? I mean, I'm still scrolling. The same exact fake pic. Used to manipulate your mind.
2 people, and I can't even count on all my hands and all my toes how many news sites that they were involved in. All because they went and they showed up and they were activists for honestly less than an hour. Next thing you know, that same picture is being utilized by dozens and dozens of news organizations to go and sell the narrative, okay? And it also brings apart a very important part of everything, which is reality is not what's around you. Reality is whatever is they can fit in that television lens, okay? We've all seen that picture of AOC on her knees crying at the border. What they don't tell you is that was the border to the parking lot outside. So with that one picture, they were able to go and convey so much of a message. Because again, pictures do serve 1,000 words, and that's exactly what that picture did. And time again, we continue to kind of get caught off guard just by not looking at our surroundings, and we're trying to make everything perfect around us. When in all honesty, we might all see different things. But the only perception that matters in this room is actually that phone right there. That's recording this entire thing. Because that's the way that everyone's going to be able to see this. So when we think about online activism, there's a few different ways to kind of get involved in your normal 9 to 5. So we're starting to really dive into what you can do, because I wanted to make sure that this training was kind of just mild, very easy ways for you to go and make a difference in your community, but also make it so you're not having too much exposure. Because the last thing any company wants is their CEO or a vice president or middle-level manager going out there into the general public and making a fool of themselves on television. So I wanted to make sure that this is all things that pretty much normal people that aren't paid activists year-round are going to be willing to do. So with online activism, email blasts. Think about all the newsletters that you could send out, whether it's talking about a certain topic or highlighting different issues in the community. Influencers. Maybe you have a great following online, or maybe you have a friend that has a great following online. There's a reason that the White House has continued to go and pander to these influencers to get messages out there on TikTok and Twitter and you name it at this point. They're paying big bucks for people to go and film videos and offering very cool opportunities for them to go and put out a certain message to a certain demographic. Okay, so think about that with your forms of activism. There's something called an SEO takeover. This one's kind of fun. So when you go and you do, that's search engine optimization, okay? So if you go and you search plumbers nearby, right? There's a massive fight behind the scenes to see who's gonna be the top result on plumbers near me. And there's even a bigger fight to make sure that certain people are on the first page and certain people aren't. And that's through their SEO, okay? When you go and Google a candidate's name or a group's name, you can actually go and optimize your website to include a lot of the major search terms through Google Analytics, a lot of the times, to find out what those actually are. And you can go and utilize that to create a web page, whether it's a redirect page or whether it's just a as you'll see later, a spoof website, whatever it may be that includes all of those search terms, and then you make sure that people are clicking on it. And then over time, what happens is you're now the first result. Do you know how angering it is for a candidate or anyone at all? Well, imagine your business, right? You go and you search up your business's name and your opponent's the first one at the top. That's pretty frustrating. You searched for your business's name and your opponent popped up before you did. That's exactly what you want, because most people, 95% of the time, they don't even move on to the second page of the Google search results.
That's true, it's paid, can you do that for free?
And you can do paid as well, but with SEO takeovers, yeah, you can. It's just called SEO optimization. But if you do it for, activist reasons, it's a takeover. But again, that stuff does matter over time, where you can go and really make a difference, because that first result, when you're looking for a quick answer, you want to make sure that you're the first result, because who do you think Google pulls from to find an answer to something as simple as how old is Brad Taylor? Well, it's not going to go to the 10th page on Google. It's going to go to probably the first page, which is honestly probably Wikipedia a lot of times, to find out that age. And a lot of times Google will have that as just a pop-up. So you can go and counter a lot of the searches that people are doing and feed them the information you would like them to see instead of your opposition's. Okay? So spoof websites and redirects. This one's kind of fun because I think a lot of campaigns have kind of, once it happens to just even one person in their caucus, they start to get very wise about everything. And essentially what the spoof websites and redirects are is, if I went to dakotacookforcongress.com and that's my official webpage, well, guess what? If someone's my opponent and they're smart, they're going to spend the $8 to buy Cook for Congress, dakotacookforcongress.org. They're going to focus on buying up any single website that sounds like it would possibly be theirs, and they're going to go and they're going to put a redirect link to their website. This famously was done when the Biden campaign went and was promoting a Hispanics for Biden type event. And they went and they bought this nice fancy web domain, or at least they thought they did. And then all of a sudden the Trump campaign went out and purchased that website link that they were promoting, and it had on all these different articles and everything. The thing is, they didn't buy the website. So the Trump campaign bought it and they made their own website. Okay? So people do remember these types of things once they're done, and they do start to get very wise about it. And it's very cheap to do, because if the website's not owned by anyone, you can go through GoDaddy and buy it for $7.99 and have it within 5 minutes. Okay? A hashtag hijack. On Twitter, everyone's always trying to use those hashtags because it feeds into, you click on the hashtag and it goes to a bunch of other tweets that also use those hashtags. So why don't you go and just steal your opponent's hashtag and continue to put your message out there, so anytime someone clicks on the hashtag, guess what? All they see is all about you, not them. Fact checking. This one's probably the newest of it all, and I actually didn't see this on any of the opposition's stuff or anything like that. I didn't see it anywhere. On our side, the other side, doesn't matter. When it came to fact checking, this is something I actually saw on Twitter. There was a very frustrating community note my friend had sent me, and then we clicked on the user, and it turns out that there's a certain U.S. Senate campaign that's going and has someone that goes onto every single one of their opponents' tweets that they put out that attacks their candidate that they support. They make sure that they put a community note under each and every single one of them. So in that way, no matter what, they can go and have their story be told. And when people see a community note, whether it's true or not, right, people always start to view that with a little bit of hesitancy, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. It's like handing someone a water bottle that has a caution sign that you might drown. right? You see that caution sign, you're a little bit hesitant to take a drink of that water. Even though it has nothing to do with it, you're still a little bit hesitant, okay? And to go through that process, it takes about like 6 months from what I was reading to go and be a fact checker on that. But yes.
With all the millions that George Soros is spending on publications, radio, whatever, are you seeing him doing these kinds of things also?
This seems to be kind of the new frontier. I'm seeing it more with the activism groups. I heard about it. The only time I've ever heard of it actually being weaponized like this was on Nextdoor. There was a call to action by a lot of the Antifa groups out in the Washington area, and they went and were actually going and requesting a lot of people to go and become moderators on their Nextdoor, so that way if there was any word of anything against Antifa or against any of their political stances, they could go and shut it down and ban that user from using Nextdoor. Okay? So make sure you go and make sure that you're the voice that supports your community. And being a fact checker is very easy, because all you have to do is click on what exactly the tweet is that's bad or has bad information on it, and then link it to a certain news article. Then trust me, with News Today, you can find a news article saying 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. So you can fact check just about anything at this point, because there's articles out there to do that. And then you can kind of move into that territory. I think we're going to really start to see this get weaponized more and more as time moves on. In-person activism, so something called a town hall takeover. Heck, this happened down in Charlotte. A group went and bussed people in. They had a literal bus drop off hundreds of people. They all came in wearing the same colored shirt, and they were all asking the same question. And anytime there was any time for public statement, they all went up there, all 100 or 200 of them, and went up there and said their words and their support. And guess what? The board went and supported their position. Okay? Now with politicians, they've kind of gone away from town halls, but you only need a few people to go and actually perform a town hall takeover, because you can plant people at that table, at that table, that table, and that table. And if everyone raises their hand all with the same question, and then you have someone recording it, so you can hold them accountable, right? Next thing you know, you now have their words or their statement. And a lot of these issues are very radicalized. That you can go and say one thing and half the people hate you and half the people love you, right? But for a lot of these groups, they know that you're going to take certain stances, and they use that against them. So you'll probably see a lot of the town hall takeovers happen a lot more this year, with it being a presidential, and just more and more, it just continues to grow. Host a press conference, pretty simple. Just really highlight your opponent's radical stances. Meet with elected officials. As a citizen, you have a right to go and talk to your elected officials, and they're a heck of a lot more approachable than you would think. They're just normal people that just happen to be crazy enough to put their name on a ballot, right? That's the only thing separating them from us. So don't be afraid to go talk to them. Legal assistance. If you or someone that you know is able to provide legal services, you can combat a lot of the bad legislation that gets put out there just by going and filing a lawsuit. And that change happens a heck of a lot quicker than anything else. Petitioning and delivery. This one's kind of like it's an old tactic, but what you do with it can be new. You can go and gather 1,000 signatures, and you can go and put 100 boxes behind you to make it look like you have all the support in the world. When in all honesty, you're probably putting 10 pages into each box, and you could just hand carry the whole entire thing, right? So what you make of it does matter. And heck, this even happened where a bunch of foam bricks were delivered to Speaker Pelosi's office. That's what people did. They donated to buy a brick, and that foam brick got delivered to Nancy Pelosi's office in Congress. Okay, so that did happen. Guerrilla projection and banners seems to be one of the more cutting edge ones, where, I mean, heck, you could go to I'm not giving anyone any ideas, but you could go to the NC State Watchtower and you could put a very big, go Heels or anything on there, right? And you know what? You'd probably tick off a lot of people. But there'd probably be a lot of people too that would see that and say, I like that, I like that. So think about what kind of medium you're utilizing for this entire thing, and we'll get you guys all set. Where's my backpack? Oh. One second.
Are we going to get any of these slides?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, Karen. You guys will be receiving a copy of the slides as long as you filled out the registration form on that QR code. And I will be sending a copy of that to you guys as well. If you did the Eventbrite, then I should be receiving your email address so I can send that over to you as well. My apologies, guys. Just died really quick.
Probably some political hijinks going on there, Dakota.
Bluetooth disconnected.
That's right.
Bluetooth pairing.
But with everything right now, when we think about a lot of times just being different is really what makes a good activist organization strong versus a not really effective activist group. And I think for a lot of people, you just have to be creative. Look at your environment, look around you. What do people care about? What do people think about? And where can you start to find out where your message is actually going to resonate the most? Because being different is a very good thing in politics because everyone's fed the same old stuff time and time again. You keep on getting mailers. You keep on getting phone calls. You keep on going and getting your door knocked, right? You turn on your TV. You see the same political ads, and the candidates seem to change out their faces every other year, right? There is nothing different about that whole process. And that's why sometimes when it comes to activism, door knocking is a great way because you're able to talk to someone and you're able to be different than your opponent. Because guess what? When you can go and actually talk to someone, you can find out what they care about and talk about the issues that they care about. But more importantly, you're able to shake their hand. And there's a lot to be said about that in today's day. So this is an example of just how people have gone and done the projections, the guerrilla projections. They've gone and they've done it there. You could go and do this stuff anywhere if you wanted to. And all it takes is a projector and a computer. And heck, you can even go on Amazon and buy some of the disposable kinds online too for like $15. So if you wanted to just set it and forget it and then walk away, that's an option. But if you wanted to make sure you get your investment back, all you have to do is click the off button and you're just as hidden as anyone else. Yes, Karen?
Two CMs used the Two Citizen Moms group back in 2021 or 2022 used the van with the messaging on all the panels of the van and drove it on a convoy across town.
Yeah. And that stuff's expensive, right? Because doing those for like a day is like $1,000 to rent that thing out. But you could buy a pretty good projector for $1,000 if you wanted to. You could go and make quite just as much of a difference because you go and you take a picture of that, and next thing you know, you've got it permanently, even when you take it now. And the best part is it doesn't damage anything. Nothing I'm going to tell you guys tonight is going to damage anything. That was one of the tactics online that I kept on seeing time and time again, was just how willing people are to destroy things. We're not destructive people, so I want to let you know that. But with anonymous activism, we got boycotts, divestments, standard stuff, take your money and run, flash mobs. You can really hide yourself within a big crowd. You only need stuff just a few minutes is all you need to really gather attention from people. You'll typically see it listed online as like a die-in, where you'll have people just walk in a crowd and then they'll just fall on the ground and people are like, what the heck happened? And then there's more and more and people think like the plague is happening. So people do that tactic. You can file complaints. citizens have a right to file complaints anonymously on candidates. You just go to the Board of Elections, State Board of Elections. If you see someone doing something wrong, you can report them for it. You can be a watchdog on social media. You can go and create a Facebook page just focused on an issue and just all the craziness that's going on, whether you want to change it or you're in support of it. Chalkings or stickerings. We've all seen the little things that say, I did that, right? When we go get gas. That stuff does matter, and it does make a difference. So think about little ways that you can go and make a difference in your community. Yes?
You talk about anonymously reporting a complaint. What's the abuse of that?
Well, if you're holding people accountable, there's really no abuse. Because if they did something wrong, then it can get reported. Yeah.
So you accuse somebody of something nefarious that isn't true, but you're anonymous, so you can call it and just do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're starting to see that with like something called swatting. Now, that's not what I would say is activism at all. I'd just say it's just highly destructive. But that's kind of an example of, being anonymous too far, and then you can call in any bit that you want. So I think if you're going and using it to file complaints on actual issues, then you can do that. There's a guy out in Washington State. He was a big help for a lot of the ideas that I got. And he went and told me that he went and kept on filing complaints on elected officials. So much so that for the first time ever, they had to rush over to the minority group in Washington and say, we need to pass a bill. And they were like handed all this power because they were like, all right, we need to do this or that. And they named the bill on the Hill about him. They said this is the bill to stop that guy. So when it comes down to it, one person can go and cause a ton of chaos because he filed like 100 to 200 different campaign finance report violations against those people. So over time, they said, we don't like this, we're going to change it and make it better. But one person really can make a difference, okay? A big issue earlier this year was expanding the Reagan National Airport and the different routes that it offered. A lot of people thought that all the noise complaints that were done, the 8,760 complaints in 2015 were just 8,760 ticked off people that went to call and complain about the noise. Well, it was actually 2 people that lived at the same house that filed 6,852 of those complaints. And when you look at Denver, Washington Dulles, Vegas, and LAX, you find out that 3 people at the most make up the vast majority of those complaint calls. But this was a key talking point for the people that did not want to expand it, in addition to a slew of other things, right? But over time, it kept on being a talking point that was used, and expansion was actually not passed by the House of Representatives this year. And it just shows 2 people at one house making 19 calls a day can make a difference. A lot more commitment than I have, but guess what? It does matter. When we think of this, we always want to have a media campaign aspect. So earned media is exactly what you're doing. It's that form of activism that you're doing in the community. You have op-eds that you can write in local papers before you actually do something. Maybe you're demanding that someone takes a certain stance, and if they don't, you're going to make sure that they, have some form of activism used against them. And then ultimately, maybe there's an op-ed talking about your activist event that you had done. A literature review, we're starting to see this a little bit more at some of the higher brow type arguments where you can go and fund different studies that are done and look at certain issues. And with those literature reviews, they get used in scientific documents that then go and find their ways into articles. And then those articles find their way into talking points, right? And then you always want to have a response to your activism from your opponents. And a lot of times people kind of stop there, but you need to keep the heat, right? So when we go through this whole entire thing, step 1, you got to craft that message and find a bunch of groups that are going to be supportive of your cause and what your issue actually is. Step 2, you got to schedule, plan, and execute your form of activism. And the best forms of activism are always a combination of a bunch of the different tactics that I taught you today. Step 3, you got to promote your message, whether it's through press releases or media content. Make sure someone always records or takes pictures of your event, because if it didn't happen through a camera lens, it didn't happen at all, right? You can also invite a bunch of local media too. Don't expect them to always show up. They usually don't. And then you can post that on social media and stuff too, and then a lot of times that will gain traction, and then the media will find their way on it. Step 4, your opposition should take the bait, and they should have some sort of response to your form of activism. Guess what? You always want to punch back, because if you go and you let them respond and have that final word, you pretty much did nothing. You always want to keep baiting them and always want to stay on the offensive with them until your ultimate goal is accomplished. And then you keep going, because guess what? You got to move the Overton window over to your side a little bit when you can. So when you think of advertising, you got pioneering. This is for like those new groups, right? They focus on those people with their message that have something to gain by being a part of their organization. Okay? Then we have competitive, and this is where you start to have, maybe similar ideas in the marketplace, and you want to make sure that your stance focuses on the strong attributes that it has and the benefits that may not be available from other current, ideas, laws, you name it. And then finally, we have the comparison, and this is more for the later stage ideas and forms of activism, because this is where you can really go and talk about, well, this idea is better than that idea, and here's why. Final tips for you guys: market publicly, market often, and market loud. When it comes to activism, make it relevant, strike quick, and always punch back. Do you guys have any questions?
Well, you were the Leadership Institute, right? That's the umbrella.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so tell us about Martin Blackwell, how I got started. Was it mail? Was it direct mail? Was that the beginning of it?
Yeah, so...
And then it's had all these babies. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, so I'm glad we have someone that knows his LI knowledge. So Martin Blackwell is our founder. Martin Blackwell has done an incredible job. He's truly a titan in the conservative movement, but just like all people involved in politics, they got involved at some point. And his point was when he was in college, he had joined, just started doing a bunch of activism on college campuses, and then became the youth chair for the Reagan campaign. Then he went and continued to go and realize that a lot of conservatives don't have any training. And that's continued to kind of be a consistent issue at almost every level. Unfortunately, the Leadership Institute's done a lot to really kind of address that, but we still have a long ways to go, like always. And we're trying our best to always be on the forefront of knowledge and things like that. So we started out doing direct mail fundraising asks, and starting out just traveling around anywhere that would be willing to take him and learn and do some of these trainings from just a young guy. And now, I mean, heck, we've got a massive building over in Arlington, Virginia. Over 100 staff is employed there. Not to mention the fact that we've grown from just our campus activism. We now have a group that's grassroots, that goes and travels state to state, group to group, whoever will take us to go and provide training for those people in those areas. So that's the department I'm with. And then we have the Raleigh Gaines Center. We have the campus reform, which really focuses on doing the media stuff on college campuses. I mean, heck, you name it, we probably have our feet in it. And if we don't have our feet directly in it, we certainly have done it through a lot of the leaders that we've really been able to go and be able to grow and foster those relationships for them to be successful at an early age. And kind of nurture them to the level that they need to be. So let's be honest, Turning Point started out as just a very small group, and Leadership Institute went and helped them grow very early on and provided them a little bit of that safe haven and those connections that they needed to really start to blossom. So we try and be the fertilizer for a lot of these groups when they need it most, which is right in the beginning. So thank you for that. Yes.
Have you discovered, looking at demographically, which media or which activism is most effective?
It's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of times the whole media, the best medium for any sort of activism in today's day, even though it seems like a gamble, is social media. And I think a lot of times where people really start to get stuck on social media is they think, well, I put it out as a tweet, it should go viral because I put a lot of time and effort into this, right? And then next thing you know, they have a dog dressed up like a hot dog and that thing's going viral instead. Like, why does any of this make sense, right? But I think what really works is continuing to keep the pressure in your area. Because on our campaign trainings, we'll talk about the importance of not talking to people, talking to voters. And there's a big difference for that. Now, when we're activists, we're fine talking to people a lot more than voters a lot of the time. But if you can go and have 10 different people really start to push out the same message, it increases your odds of something happening and it gaining legs. And at the very worst, the networks of those 10 individuals get to see it. And that's before anyone goes and retweets it or reposts it on Facebook, you name it, right? Social media seems to be the easiest way, but in the rural areas, you really can't be next door. Next door is very good, and even in some of these urban areas, suburban areas, excuse me, that seems to be a very strong avenue for getting your message out as compared to trying to do Twitter. Local media still matters in some of these very rural areas. Now, there is something to be said about being able to go at a statewide level, but again, you have to think about where can I cause the most impact? Am I fighting for a local issue? If you're fighting for a local issue, what are you going to accomplish by being on the national news, right? If you can go and make just as much difference and way more pressure put on those people because you had the local, journal write an article for the last 4 weeks about how they're taking a bad stance through those op-eds, more people are going to read that, and it's going to spread a lot more through word of mouth. As for other forms, diversify. The more you can diversify and use a combination of these tactics, you increase your odds of actually getting something picked up. If you stick with just one form where you just went and tweet something out at 2 o'clock in the morning, good luck, right? But if you can go and really start to diversify and be effective in the long run, it's because you went and you tried a bunch of different things. And getting a good, strong following is not easy because it does take a lot of time. And for what we're doing, we don't need a big following because we're not trying to take down these national issues. We're just trying to change our local area and our backyards. So sometimes just talking to people is the best way too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Dakota. Can you speak again to how to use different publicly available resources to optimize an organization's SEO? Like if they really want to be associated with, say there's a policy debate, and an organization, they don't have that like in a mission statement or something, but they really want to be involved in policy debate text searches. They want to be at the top of the returns. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so there's a few different websites that you can utilize through Google. I'll have to brush up on my notes to make sure I get you the proper websites. But you've got my card, so you can get a hold of me. But Google does offer a lot of search engine type things where you can go and see how you're performing versus other people. And then there's actually a little bit under that, Google Analytics, okay, is what you'll use. So you can see how you're doing versus your other opposing message. So you can find out how many people are searching McDonald's versus Burger King, right? And then you can go and find out what kind of keywords are being searched up. So if they're searching for a Big Mac, guess what? You're probably not going to find that on a Burger King website. But if you want to take that away, you got to make sure that you have a web page that has that search term in there. Because if you don't have that search term, guess what? You're not popping up when people are searching that certain word. Okay? And yes, there is the paid version as well through Google Ads that you can do as well. But let's be honest, we're not trying to spend a ton of money for activism a lot of these times. We're just kind of working with a few $100s in our bank accounts most of the times. But if you have the budget for it, heck, it's a good way to make sure you shoot up to that first page real quick. But the more that you can go and have those certain keywords included in your website and on multiple pages as well, the more likely it is that your web page pops up at the top, solely because it contains all of those keywords on so many different pages. So really start to think about that too. But does that answer your question to a point? So I'll see if I can find those websites for you, but there's definitely ways to do it. And it costs nothing to go and do a lot of this stuff. It just takes a lot of man hours to get it done. And it shouldn't be expensive to try and go and make a difference in your community. And that's one of the beautiful things is just how many resources are available for people online. You just got to know where to look. And a lot of times that's where a lot of people get left behind. So any other questions? Yes.
Dakota, you mentioned new and emerging tactics and techniques. There's a lot of fervor the last couple of years around AI, specifically generative AI. How are you leveraging that in this kind of activity?
So me personally, I'm not doing that. But I will admit that it does allow for, I mean, heck, you can go on Twitter right now and you can probably see a picture of Barack Obama dunking a basketball, or, you know, George H. Bush at this point, swimming, and, you know, whatever it is, there's all these new fake pictures that are being created through AI that people are starting to use as forms of activism, more through the comedic purposes. But over time, laughing at something time and time again because it's funny is not something that you're probably going to view as favorable in the long term, right? Because there's a difference between laughing with someone and laughing at someone, and these images are created to be laughed at. So, you know, I think that we're starting to see a lot more of that. One of the emerging issues is just fake bot accounts. I mean, imagine if you could flip a switch and go on the offensive on your opposition and flood them with a bunch of nasty comments about their stances and how you don't support their stance, or you're trying to push them from one direction or the other. You know, over time, that does take a toll on people, especially that are newly getting involved into politics, that really do look at every single message, every single comment, and that could be enough for people to leave the scene completely. And if they don't leave, they're certainly going to be more willing to take some more radical stances than they would have thought beforehand. So I think it's only a matter of time that these tools become weapons, because we've seen it time and time again. When anything new occurs, it takes a few years where it gets adjusted to, and then it becomes a weapon. And I think that AI and bots are going to be the new frontier with that. And it's only a matter of time before they get just as smart as us online, which is a pretty low bar in the first place. But yes, Brad, you had a question?
Yeah, so I was, you know, thinking when you're talking, especially when I saw the picture of the guy, the two people, right, in front of the Supreme Court, no man is above the law, or nobody's above the law. And I was just thinking about how obviously these relatively few people are really effective at getting out a message, and then the rest of the country or the rest of the world thinking that those two people represent, you know, a massive movement, and then thinking even further about just how we're getting snowed a lot of times by the media, by the paper, or whatever we see on Facebook or Twitter. You know, we're just getting snowed by a very few people, you know, who are making us think that there's, like, for example, you know, all this power among people who really hold these pretty radical ideas. I mean, is that what's going on? Because if that's the case, I mean, shouldn't we more effectively be able to use the media, right, for our own purposes? I mean, there is some hope there, because we just need to let people know this is a bunch of garbage. I mean, this is just a relatively few people who are getting super big megaphones and making the rest of us feel small, right?
I mean, he's not wrong. There is a very small group of activists out there that are truly starting to push that Overton window and push the narratives into the new territory. And a lot of times it's because we as conservatives just don't speak up. I mean, how many times do you go and open up the NNO and, you know, see a conservative in an op-ed, right? Or a letter to the editor from a conservative? Never. But you also have to ask too, how many conservatives are sending in op-eds, and how many conservatives are actually going and doing those letters to the editors? And a lot of times the answer is 0. And that's because they're starved for content, and then we wonder why they have a bit of a slant. It's because they're pandering to the people that write for them and do their jobs for them. That's a very easy thing for them to go and do. So I think for us as conservatives, we just have to learn how to just say, you know what, I know the system looks like it's against me, but I'm gonna try my best, and I might just break through. And once I can break through, it might bring other people to also break through as well. So don't be afraid to take those chances, because you never know if the reason you're not seeing that is solely because no one's saying it. Everyone's thinking it, but no one's saying it. So go be an activist. That's why I did this training. Go do something. Go out in your community and make a difference. And you know what? You might just make the front of the NNO. But he had a question. I'll get you, and then we'll probably end. Yes.
My question kind of ties in with what he was talking about. We have media that has an agenda. And if that media wishes to cover a story, they will. No matter how big it is or how small it is, they will embellish it. If there's another story that's similar, but it's not in favor of their agenda, they ignore it. How do you get past that? How serious and outlandish does your activism have to be to get their attention so they don't ignore you?
I'm going to be honest with you. At this point, I think their bar is very low for conservatives, how journalists view us, in the activist light, right? I think any form of activism at this point would be enough to make the paper, because they'd be surprised that we actually did something. And I don't think it's a race to see who's going to be the most comedic or who's going to be the most crazy. I think at the end of the day, you just have to make sure that you're effective, because you get a lot of visibility and you choose to do something with that platform that you create. If you just build a platform and never use it, then what's the point, right? I mean, heck, Taylor Swift doesn't sing anymore just for the sake of singing, right? She doesn't have a Facebook page or Twitter just so people can listen to her sing. She's doing it because she has to sell concert tickets, and she wants to make sure that they buy all that merchandise and everything else. So think about what you can do with your platform. And you know, if she ever chooses to go and make sure that people listen to another album or anything like that, she can easily push them into that direction as well. And for us, we just got to do something. And I mean, there's been many a times where we've had campaign events on campaigns that I was on, and you'd think like, wow, we're up in the middle of nowhere. The news is definitely going to have to cover us. And then they don't come, right? So that's when you go and you send out an in case you missed it to those journalists that you sent that out to, with, you know, a picture, some video, and maybe a few quotes from some people that attended that event. And then that way, maybe there's a chance that they pick it up. Another effective way too is just go directly to those editors and say, here's my story, I'd like to pitch it to you. What do you think? And they might give you a thumbs up, or they might give you a thumbs down, but at least you tried. And I found sometimes the stories that you think they're gonna take, they're not the ones that they take. It's the stories you don't think they're gonna take that they take. So don't be afraid to throw anything at them. I mean, they're looking for content, and they're looking for clicks at the end of the day. So make sure you can deliver that for them. And then last question. Does that answer your question though?
Yes.
Perfect. Last question.
In regard to the slide projector, if the point, I mean, if you stage it somewhere, not too many people are gonna see it, so you have to snap a picture and circulate that.
Mhm.
So can't you just cut to the chase and get on Canva and say you did it?
You could. I mean, that's a form, but are people gonna believe it? That's the thing,
Yeah,
right?
I think they-
Maybe. But you also don't want to build your organization and build your stances on lies. I always try and make sure people always kind of like at least follow through and do what they say and be truthful during the entire conversation. So I mean, if you want to, you could lie about anything, right? I could put out a press release saying I just got back from the moon and Elon's spaceship brought me up there and I just touched down, right? And with all the editing and everything, I could go and do that. But once someone does a little bit of digging and they find out, oh, Dakota wasn't at the moon, I saw him last week, then the whole thing kind of crumbles on down.
But it did
So-
crumble in AIER. I mean, to us it did, but it was effective.
It's up to our voters at the end of the day, right? And I think people fail to realize that everyone hates Congress, but everyone loves their representative. And at the end of the day, that's kind of how it goes. I know, I hear the Raleigh people in here. I know, I hear you. But at the end of the day, it just always try and be as truthful as possible. And plus, it's a little projector; shouldn't be too long. You could brush it up and make it look better. I mean, if you want to, but it's better to say you did it and show you did it than try and say you did it and you didn't do it, if that makes sense. So, and then that's the end of the question. So I appreciate you guys bringing me. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much, Dakota. Please consider contributing whenever you get a ticket. We, again, are totally supported by all of you, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Fill out those things in the middle.
Take pictures.
Yep.